Welcome everyone here to the Nutmeg Tavern. We are live and we're going to be having fun in the tavern today. I'm your host, John Townsend, and we're going to be talking about fun 18th century stuff. I'm joined on the other side of the time vortex by Ivy, who's on the console.
Hi, everybody.
She wasn't ready for that because I always do it the other way. And Lauren is in the chat.
Hello.
And we've got people chiming in from all over the United States, crawling into the tavern, finding a seat. I hope you do too. And we've got folks from Washington, New York, Alabama, South Carolina, Maryland. We got somebody from Germany who's in the chat. So wonderful to see you here. And yes, the equinox is here and the sun is going to start leaving us really, really rapidly. So, today's topic here in the tavern we can all chat about is digging into these strange corners of research into the 18th century and other things. I mean, today we're lucky enough that if there's just the oddest esoteric thing you would like to research, of course, you can go out onto the interwebs and dig around in the strange corners and find information on anything your heart pleases. It's like whether people worship toenails or whatever it is, you can find something where there's some weird information out there. And in the 18th century, it's kind of like that also. And so I sometimes when I'm researching, I just go to some site like archive.org and I start fishing, and I'll just sort of throw my line in a year or a bracket of years and random kind of interesting words to see what sort of things pop up, what items people have researched and in this 18th century time period, what they're writing about. And today we're going to be plucking a few of those little fish out of the sea to just talk about them for a minute. I'm not going to go into depth on any of them. It's just kind of the interesting, fun places and things you'll find as you go dipping into the research. Some of them are pretty normal and other ones are like, okay, that's weird. But there's lots of fun stuff like that. It's not quite so, in-depth as what you would find today in any particular topic, but you just never know what you're going to go find when you're researching like that. So I do that all the time. Yes, that toenail cult. You don't trust them, okay? Just do not. Anyway. I've put some of the links down in the description. I haven't gotten them all because I was still working on this. Let me see. What's this question here? Random question for y'all. Do you like science fiction? Stargate wouldn't work without history. Too true. I enjoy science fiction. Sometimes even science fiction in the 18th century.
Especially the ones that are grounded in, they're exploring concepts about humanity. And a lot of times they're exploring them through creating a scenario, very much like with Stargate, creating a scenario that did exist historically. And they kind of recreate it, but in
space.
But in space.
It's like, what if this?
But of course, every planet looks
space.
like Earth, so.
That's right. Or
how does that
especially
work?
The forests of Canada. And there was one particular time when Dad was like, okay, what we need to do is, wouldn't it be lovely if we did like the, what is it with the albatross, the poem?
Yes, Ram of the Ancient Mariner.
Yes, but set obviously on a spaceship. And, kind of a little bit of horror and yes. Dad was he's like, oh, I wonder what the set would look like. It was
I get crazy ideas sometimes. That's just me. Like they did with the Oh Brother Where Art Thou, except they're doing Ram of the Ancient Mariner and in space.
It'd be great.
Yeah.
I feel like you could visit different alien planets, the spaceship could be the core, ship part.
Well, they're usually at sea, but...
no
anyway.
Islands, no other...
Anyway, yes. How many seasons? It's usually the last couple seasons of Stargates. Like, what's the point? And I never got into Atlantis.
Yeah, but the rest of us did, and yeah, Dad, Dad didn't like the villains in Atlantis,
yeah.
but we, especially the first like 5 or 6 seasons of Stargate, we'll like watch them, and then a couple years later we'll just rewatch them again.
That's right. Anyway, back onto our topic. Getting distracted here. So the first book that I brought it. The first book is one that turns out to be one of ours that we also sell here. It's called Virtues of British Herbs from 1771, and there it is, the kind of frontispiece for that book. And I found it very interesting in the in what it was doing. It's got some great plates for it inside. I don't have the plates pictured. I was going to do that, but I ran out of time. But it kind of goes through, it describes the plant, it gives you a picture. It's in black and white, and it's just a sketch, but it's interesting. And it had lots of different plants in it. Let me see what kind of, does it have yeah, it's got a index in the back of the plants and an index of diseases. So if you're like, oh, I've got a problem with fevers, well, check page 91. It's got butterbur and coniza, which I've never heard of, agrimony and feverfew and petiphyte, and some of these are common names or even kind of Latin names for it, so I don't know exactly what the plant is. But the one that caught my eye, which I thought was funny, was sneezewort. And I don't know if sneezewort grows anywhere around here. But it's got flowers that are white with a grayish disc. They bloom from July to November. Culture renders them double, and they are then very handsome ornaments in your garden. This is an acrid, sharp plant. It brings water into the mouth, and snuffed up, it causes sneezing. Must be why it's called sneezewort. And that even to the bleeding of the nose. So, sounds like it can be a little too powerful. It is not one of those herbs I would wish should be of common use. So I thought it was pretty interesting that here, it's like, here's the virtues of this herb, and the virtues are that he doesn't think it should be in common use. So sometimes your virtue isn't very virtuous. So that is from the Virtues of British Herbs. Now, sometimes you run onto a book and you think, okay, now this is very interesting. It's maybe very, very good. And maybe this is really important for research. And you read it and you think about it and you're like, no. Sometimes there'll be a book and it'll be, maybe it's a kind of pseudo-scientific pamphlet or something, 60 pages long. And it's a snooze fest from right at the beginning, and you just basically toss it aside because you don't have time to spend reading something for who knows how many hours just to find some gem in it. And then occasionally you'll skip over it. A year later, you'll find that it had a sentence in it that was incredibly important, which I found before. And then so it's like, okay, I got to dig deeper on these things that I look at. I saw this one. It's called Egregious Quackery Displayed, or a narrative of the late memorable case of Signor Capitano Maceo. And it's like, quackery, this maybe's got some really interesting stuff in it. And then it starts to, I was reading some in it, and it's like, okay, I really don't get this. And it turns out that it is satire about the death of a captain, of this Captain Massey. And it's written kind of in a fake, this happened in Spain, but it really didn't happen in Spain. So I don't know what.
That's always tricky when
It's
you write
like-
satire, especially in
Yeah.
paintings and in writing,
Yeah.
because there is stuff to be gleaned from it, like the directions for servants.
Yeah.
But the interpretation is always a little trickier.
Yeah, and you can really misinterpret it, and then you can say something is true when it's not, because it was obviously not true at the time, and they're just making fun of you basically because you're dumb enough not to understand the context of what was happening, why they wrote it in this time period. And I clipped out a section of it, but I'm not sure. Let's see. Yes, all of the Don's most powerful efforts proved no matter of the match for the inveterate and confirmed obstinacy of the malady. That still prevailed. It harassed the patient, and it perplexed the doctor. At length, either through the caprice familiar enough to sick persons, or that the Don was willing to wash his hands of such exclusively baffling work. Anyway, basically somewhere, I should have highlighted it. He talked about, oh yeah, here we go. Leaves no medical stone unturned in order to render his patient service, but as experience in all ages has sufficiently convinced mankind there was no such thing as absolute infallibility. And anyway, he gives him the whole pharmacy, and the guy's still sick. You know how it is, trying to figure out how to cure somebody, and they had the same amount of problem, or if not more, in the 18th century. So that was the egregious quackery displayed. I probably could have accidentally spent 5 hours on that book, and then it's like, okay, that wasn't useful. This one's fun. Let's see. Yes, the Yorkshire songster. Now, these are always calling to me when I see these books, and songbooks of the time period. And sometimes they are, sometimes they're going to have really interesting things in them, and other times they're tricky to understand or whatever.
Did you send along the Whitby Abbey to Rick and Hillary? I mean, is that how that originally happened?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Because every once in a while you run across, and of course when you do run across one you love, you send it off to musicians.
Right. So let me see. This has got, now this songbook only had the words to the songs. It didn't even say this goes to the tune of or whatever. So this one's just words, and let me see if I can jump into this one. All that you do delight in Bologna's drums to hear, all that you do love fighting, come sit down by me here and listen to my muse a while, who in a pleasant humble style went about for to compile news to declare. How the cavaliers and the noble peers were forced to yield, and how their haughty worships were forced from the field. There was Newcastle, Cavendish, most famous in the wars, who British swords did brandish amidst York's stately bars, thinking those strongholds to keep, winding themselves in trenches deep, neither dead or fast asleep, but mark then it was from a lofty tower in a fatal hour through a glass. Don't ask me why that didn't rhyme, but sometimes it's written really difficultly. Sometimes it'll have a little parentheses at the end of the line with more words in it, and it's actually the end of the line below it, which is, boy guys, trying to make it tough on me. Anyway, that was the Yorkshire songster, and that is a blank page. That's not helping me at all.
Okay, I do have some questions.
Yes.
So one of them is unrelated to what we've been talking about specifically. But somebody was wondering if you knew if Ryan was going to be at the Colonial Market Days and encampment at Lebanon this weekend.
I do not know. I don't think so. He was, I would imagine he would be, he can trick me, so I don't know for sure.
He hadn't mentioned it so
Right,
far.
he hadn't mentioned it, and he was roasting earlier today, so.
That would have been a quick get to, pull everything together. So, kind of on the medical question, how did the indigenous North Americans influence medical practices in the 18th century?
The doctors of the time period were very, very interested in all sorts of medicinal plants. And there are lots of interesting references, and I could have, I think I have a book later on. Yes, I've got another book in the collection that's medical here. They're interested, and the doctors don't tend to be, they tend to be just as interested in, what would you call it? Vulgar medicine or folk medicine, looking for, it's like, okay, it worked for those people. Is this a medicine that might work for, is this got true virtues, or is it just, what would you call it? Just a wives' tale or whatever, right? And so they're looking at those medicines and thinking about them and studying them, just like we do again today. I think there was probably a time, maybe the 50s, 1950s through the 80s, when it's just like, we've got this medicine down, versus really thinking about medical ideas that are happening within folk medicine, and there probably is something going on with them. So they were interested in those, and so there are a lot of Native American things that they would write about or were interested in.
And sometimes that's where the care was coming from for people on the frontier who that was the
Exactly.
person around who had medical knowledge, so that's where they went. Somebody else was wondering if we could do an episode on David Thompson, an early explorer in North America who made maps and worked with early navigational equipment. I'll have to make a note about that one.
Yeah, Lauren will make a note about that.
So Simon Passant was wondering, how about looking at maybe cuisine from cultures being cooked in the New World in the 17th century?
Yeah, tougher to research, at least directly, other than trying to find them talking about it. So there's no such thing as a cookbook that you're going to find. The age of the cookbook is the 18th century, and there aren't as many in the 17th century, and there's certainly none that are specific to North America in the time period. So you kind of have to, do some stretching and figure out if people are writing about that, and if they give you descriptions, and then how do you figure out what those descriptions really were of, and recipes for that.
And then for us, it's tricky because when you're trying to research other cultures' recipes from the 17th century, even if it's not the New World, then we always try to do primary recipes, and we don't speak any language but English.
Right.
So a lot of them aren't necessarily translated. Some of them are. You'll get in the 18th century, you'll get translations of French cookbooks and that, but it makes the research trail much trickier to track down.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and then somebody was Labyrinth VR was wondering, what is your favorite historic dish that you've made and cooked in the?
I've probably cooked over 300 dishes, at least. And I have no idea how to choose my best.
I'm going to choose the Parmesan ice cream for you.
There you
I feel
go.
like it's in the top 5. So we're going to go with that one.
Parmesan ice cream. I want some right now.
Okay.
With a little nutmeg on it.
Oh, hold on. There's a super chat up here. I didn't write it down because it's much easier to find. Okay, Macaroni Gluer says, enjoyed the historical stories last week. Maybe you could do a few little plays or movies based on them. So the Old Bailey records, right? And we could do a dialogue.
Yes.
A little courtroom scene. We could do a new set that's a courtroom.
Ooh. We do have something like that in here someplace, I think. This next one, here we go. It is The Wonderful and Strange Apparition and Ghost of Edward Ashley. And I have glasses on here. This young man seeing a sort of a topping man come after her, one as she used to wash for, and he, thinking it was one that came to deprive him of his mistress, grew jealous of her, and truly did not stick to tell her that he believed that the said gentleman was one that had real... I don't know.
I'm sure there was a simpler way to word that sentence.
They're all written like that. It's like, what? How could you even think this? Anyway, the apparitions and ghosts of deceased persons are so very rare that they are hardly credited by anyone, but that this I'm going to treat you of has made such a noise all over the town that the greatest unbeliever of such matters may be satisfied to all intents and purposes, which is as follows. I'll leave you in.
I think that's so funny because of the few kind of accounts that I've run across, they all start out very similar to that. You're like, well, I know that most of the stories you hear, but this one.
Me when you're done. Okay, are we back? That's the real question. So if we're back, what happened was there was the power failure because of a giant rainstorm, and that's what happened. So we were all sitting here going, uh-oh, the lights are blinking, and our candles all went out at once, and that was the end of it.
A giant gust of wind and blew all the...
Giant gust of wind blew out all the candles, and we're back. That was the... before we lose connection again. Every week I try to get to the brand new Patreon and YouTube members, etc. So, new and renewing YouTube members. Christopher Harbury, Herman Self, Sarah Cruz, Linda Nagany, Gerald Bach, Alan Mayers, Enrique Page, Lorraine Scott, Virginia Manning, Igor Kalenko, Phil Meadows, Chris Harris, Ben Edwards, and then brand new Patreon folks, Chris, there's no way I can pronounce his last name, and then Richard. So thank you both, wonderful folks that support us very, very directly. So what one was the next one? What do you think, guys? That was British Herbs, yeah, and then...
This Wonderful Strange Apparition.
Right, Wonderful Strange Apparition. There it is. Yes. Ooh, there we go. The account of remarkable cures performed by the use of Maredant's antiscorbutic drops, and so this would be basically a patent medicine of the
good
18th
for
century.
Everything that ails you.
It's going to cure some good stuff here. To Mr. Norton, surgeon, the person who is selling this wonderful elixir of life. It is above 2 years since my son was cured of inveterate scurvy by the use of your drops. He was one entire scab, from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet, besides which he had several holes in one of his legs and arms. I employed several surgeons and sent him by their directions to bathe and drink seawater without effect. As I think this is a most extraordinary cure, I desire you to publish it for the good of others. July 9th, 1772, Nathaniel Lane. So it's a pamphlet full of these praises of these amazing drops. And I certainly hope that they're still selling them because it sounds like a miraculous cure. That's all I can say.
Like, sign me up. Where are you sending the mail order for?
Yeah, here we go. Blotches and eruptions. I'll just keep going on that one. Don't need any more of that. Then there are more typical books that I would generally pick up and read more of. This is the Diary of David McClure, Doctor of Divinity, from 1748 to 1820. And this book is one in which you got to be really, really careful when you're doing the research and you've blocked out a time period and you're like, I'm searching for information for this, but the book that you're going to find it in is printed in the late 19th century. This thing was printed in 1899. So even though I would say I'm looking for information from, say, 1800, and it turns out the book that has the best information is in 1899, how am I supposed to find anyway? So
yeah, because sometimes you have to search for titles and make it a really broad time frame.
Well, yeah.
But that means you have a lot more to sort through.
So I didn't have time to go skimming through a 300-page book or reading a 300-page book, but I just basically, it's like, open it up to a page. What's on here? What's it like? And there was a very interesting part there. He's talking about interacting with a particular colonel, and the colonel was fighting in the wars, and then later on he's appointed to a government position. He was commissioned by Governor Penn, who lived in the state of Philadelphia, on public business to Governor Law of Connecticut. Yeah, he put himself up in the public house in Milford and dressed himself in his best attire to wait on the governor. So he's waiting on Governor Law, I believe. He knocked at the door and was let in by a man in plain dress and the appearance of a common farmer. He concluded that he was a laborer or a servant of the governor and asked if Governor Law was at home. He was a little surprised to find that when he had made a mistake, that it was the governor whom he was addressing. It's like, whoops. He was received with great hospitality by him and informed him that he had a commission from Governor Penn on public business, requested to know when it would be convenient to him that he should have the honor to lay this matter before him. The governor replied that the present time was convenient. His daughter came in, and he spake to her to draw up a cup of cider, which he drank with the governor. He was invited and urged to stay and dine. A large boiled dish was placed on the table, around which the family and laborers were seated, and each one helping himself. And then he continues to go on about somebody coming in the room and asking if the neighbor could borrow a shovel. So that's the governor of Connecticut in this 18th century time period, where he is very, humble, at least in the outward appearances of himself and his household, and laborers reading at the table with them. And it's like, I think we could use some governors like that were a little more homey. Just say that. Don't think most governors are going to have people asking if they can borrow a shovel.
Well, see, they had some. I every once in a while you're like, I don't have the right shovel for this job, and you're like, it would be so useful to have one. And
And if
you
your
can't
next door
just
neighbor's
run
the
down
governor,
to the hardware store and get one. So I too would borrow one from my neighbor.
hey neighbor, governor. Anyway, yeah, we'll skip out of that one. This one, you saw that image. I'll give it back to you in a minute. The description and draft of a machine for reducing fractures of the thigh by Mr. Henry Ettrick, surgeon. Having frequently considered the many inconveniences and great difficulties attending to common methods of reduction, I determined with myself to attempt a form more mechanical and certain. I immediately fixed on the axle and wheel as the most simple and yet fully capable of taking in and engrossing all and every advantage necessary towards the reducing of fractures of the thigh. So there it is. It's a machine. So say you fractured is that your femur there? Yeah. You know, and you just kind of like got a bed with a strap on the person. Anyway. It describes it.
This does not sound safe. That was my first thought when this was described to me.
Yeah, but there's a lot of, the problem is, your upper leg's got a lot of big muscles in it.
Yeah.
And you probably have to figure out how to pull that bone apart and then align it and then let it, and then all those muscles are going to be, because it hurts and no anesthesia on that one. Anyway, yikes. Are we going? I don't know if I have the perpetual motion machine in here. Huh? I know.
With the paper for it.
I don't have the paper for it.
Did you toss it with the other one?
Yeah, it was that scary. Grab it. It's a machine. No, that's that. Hold on. I'm coming. Nope. No. Okay, there was a book about essay for a perpetual machine here. This was 1709, and it was kind of boring anyway. I mean, there was nothing good. Maybe I didn't pull out anything.
He didn't crack the concept like he wanted to.
It's like I don't get it. You know what? And they didn't have a picture of the machine.
See, his advertising was not there.
Right, it had some graphs or something in it. Mm-hmm. Let's just say it probably had magnets. Yeah. Someday I'll find that there was an interesting, I may have read it on the live stream before, but in one of the advertisement books, there was an advertisement about some people who, while they were in jail for fraud, they built a perpetual motion machine.
Yes, that's the perfect time. You got lots of time on your hands.
Yeah, time on their hands. And, it's like, we built this amazing machine while we were in jail. We thought we would let you in on the bottom floor. Anyway, you'll find some of these which can be fascinating. This is the log of the brigantine. They are going on a cruise, and the name of the brigantine is Tyrannicide.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds very,
it sounds exciting, doesn't it?
A strong and dangerous name.
Right. So, Tyrannicide. Now, I printed this darn small, but you can see from this. Well, you can't see from it. So they're generally kind of put in a column situation here, and it's got like the hours of the day and what direction the wind is blowing and the course of the ship and how fast it's going. And I should have printed this twice as big because it's very hard to read. Well, compared to some script, it's very easy to read, but it's difficult to read. Anyway, they actually came upon a ship and they captured it, which is pretty rare. And unfortunately, the logs of the ships, these logs it's not like a complete diary of what's happening in the ship. It's basically a log of its what the weather is like, what direction and how fast they were going, so they can sort of reconstruct their course. It does have notes and remarks in it about important things that were happening, or if the sail blew out or something strange like happening. And they say, yeah, we stopped, we boarded this ship, we put a prize crew aboard basically, and it sailed in company for another day or so, and then it went off to be sold. There are a lot of logbooks on archive.org, and combing through them for the nuggets, not easy to do. You have to read them because they're script, and you can't search through the text very easily or at all. So it takes a lot more to digest, and sometimes they're just very boring. And we're going this direction, now we're going that direction. That's how fast we're going. It's like, okay. So it sounds really exciting. Ooh, it's a ship's log, and then like, oh, that's a ship's log. Boring.
There was a live stream we did where we were looking through the artwork that was used.
Yeah, sometimes they have fun. They draw in the margins of it.
Yes,
that's
but
cool.
I'm trying to find it, and I can't. I haven't found the right term to find the live stream yet.
Yeah. So that's not so easy. Okay, so none of those are interesting. I got rid of all that. What's up next? What is up next? Ooh, the Dancing Master. So this is funny. This is Play Forward's The Dancing Master, and they reprinted this thing like a gazillion times, from 1650 to 1720. For more than 50 years. And this little frontispiece, they kept redoing. So the clothes would change. It would be basically the same little picture of people looking like they're dancing, and there's two pieces of people playing violins, fiddles off to the side, and then sometimes there's this little pooty, little pooty person here in the middle playing a violin. And then the people, depending on when they printed it, they would put different clothes on the people, so kind of keep it up to date. Now, the fun thing is this has music in it, and it's got the dance directions under it. So there are no words, but it's like, okay, you go in a circle and you go this way, you go that way. It takes some interpretation. I don't know how to read the dances properly, but there's dance information. I thought I would read some of the names of the songs. So these are kind of fun. So Jack's Health, Jacob Hill's Jig, Jamaica, Jenny Come Tie My Cravat, If All the World Were Paper, Jones Placket, Joanne Sanderson, Jockey, Jog On My Honey. Let's see, there's Johnson's Jig, The Irish Trot, Isaac's Maggot, I don't know what that is, Kemp's Jig, Kensington Court, The King of Poland, Ladies of London, and let's see, Love Lies a Bleeding, Mad Robin, Maiden Fair. Yeah, so there you go. You got fun songs and songs you can dance to. That's the important thing. Which one is that? Ooh, boy, let's see. So that was that one. Oh yeah. Boy, on these handwritten ones, I gotta just print them out double size.
That's right, and like really turn up the contrast because.
Right. Because it's hard enough to read it, and then you make it so you can print it out, and then it's tiny. So check out the form of this book. It is super tall and skinny. Mm-hmm. And this is a little memorandum book. It is a Medica Memoranda memory book, 1752, and it's by Dr. Vanderlight of Providence, Rhode Island. And this is like his pharmacy book, that he keeps notes where people order things. So you'll have like on a particular month, or maybe it's for the entire year, and it'll say what they bought that particular time and how much money it is. And then sometimes I think if they paid the bill, he would just cross that section out. And some of them aren't crossed out, so maybe they never got paid. Some of them have simple medicines in them. I didn't see very many complex ones, but then again, he was kind of writing in his own shorthand, not true shorthand, but just, he would have abbreviations for different kinds of medicines, and we don't know how to necessarily read that. Mother Brown here in June and July of 1753, looks like, now she got a bottle of Bantam something cordial elixir. And also, I think they got some wheat here, which is interesting. Mr. Dean gets some lenitive elective and best bohea tea and an ounce of nutmeg. And I think there was allspice and starch in here, and ginger and sugar and indigo, and some kind of wax or something. So sometimes it looks like it was just like a general store and apothecary. Maybe like going to the drugstore, but the drugstore has, some regular.
Or maybe
food
even
supplies.
going to our, big box stores that have a pharmacy on the side. And it's
Exactly.
one of the specialties that they...
Right.
they
And so he had this tall, skinny book.
I just love the look of those tall, skinny books, but I've always found writing in them quite difficult.
Yeah,
so.
how you get those? But it was like a pamphlet, so
that
it
would
would
help
open
quite a bit.
all the way up. This one was the directions for using an electrical machine, and I think there is the machine.
See, they put the picture of the machine.
Yeah.
That's very helpful.
Right. So you could tell this was that's an electrical machine. You got to be careful with that. Let me tell you. It says brass box A contains a wheel and an endless screw. You can see A. It's over there on the right. So it's got gears basically in it that turn globe B, the big globe up there. It's probably glass. Fastened to any table by means of a screw. There's glass pillar D. Where is that? I don't know where glass pillar D is.
Is it to the left of the ball?
Yeah.
How about the
anyway.
one that's even farther off to the left?
This one's S.
Okay, what's the one off to the... What's that one?
This one?
Yeah.
That one doesn't have a name.
Maybe it's D and they just forgot to label it.
Right, okay. So anyway, the directions aren't easy to understand. But what happens? What happens is it turns that glass wheel, and then F off to the side there is holding against it something like silk or amber or something similar, horn maybe, creates a static charge, and the static charge goes onto that bar there that's labeled L, and different things happen because of the static charge. I believe that the bells will move around and maybe tinkle because of the static going down there. Possibly N with the little figures. The static electricity might rise up one of the little characters to make them look like they're doing some kind of dance.
So is this not necessarily for practical purposes, but just to show off? You're like, I have an okay.
That's exactly what's going
gotcha.
on here. The little feathers on the side, of course, the static electricity will cause them to rise up and separate from each other, like your hair when you get static electricity. And possibly you can make sparks happen with this. I believe S is some type of static electricity battery, and you could probably shock people that you've brought into your scientific experiment. So yeah, and sometimes you would have you would bring a machine like that to the tavern, and you would, tell people about the science and charge them a fee so you could shock them with it and stuff like that. So yeah, and there's directions for the electrical machine. You can have fun with that. Was that the last one? Yep, that was it. So those are the fun, strange things that I found just recently that we're not going to do an episode on. You just never know what you're going to find when you go digging in there.
It is, and one of the ones that Dad had looked at was the hot air balloon one.
Yeah.
Where he was doing experiments with this hot air balloon, and we have done a live stream on hot air balloons. But of course, you're like, a true form of research for this would be to ourselves build a hot air balloon replica and then test out the experiments. But we decided not to do that. It would be a little...
Okay. So this episode is brought to you by the other books that we sell, which aren't quite so esoteric, hopefully, as some of the strange ones that we've shown here in the episode today. So Lauren brought out some of the ones that are a little more different and interesting. This is a collection, a couple of different books about Hessians fighting in the Revolutionary War. So the Hessians by Lowell, and then the Voyage of the First Hessian Army, which is pretty harrowing, them coming over. Sometimes, you'll read about people crossing from Great Britain or Europe and coming to North America, and it's easy peasy, 7 weeks, and it was a fun time. It was like,
Good
vacation,
weather.
right? And then other times it takes 4 months and they all nearly died, and they're just like... I like the story where they get to the port and they're wondering why it's leaking, and they find that the rats have eaten a hole in the side of the ship right at the waterline.
Of course, it was right at the waterline.
Okay, bad storm and we would have sank. And it's also got Pop's journal in it at the very end. I think he talks about the super duper cold winter that one time, and they were prisoners, and so excellent book on that. The natural history of coffee, tea, chocolate, and tobacco. I don't think they have good things to say about tobacco. And a tract of elder and juniper berries, showing how useful they may be in our coffee houses, and a way of making mum, which is, I don't know, like cider or something, or it's a drink, it's a beverage. Lauren picked this one out. I know you say I can't read the cover on that one.
There's some fold-outs, I think.
Yeah, it's got fold-outs. This is the practical surveyor. So if you want to know how to survey and the art of land measuring, it's made easy, like it says. It's made
Very easy.
Easy peasy. Yeah. And look, there is a fold-out section, a map, and how to, you can learn how to make maps in an 18th century fashion. This is a modern book, but one that is quite fun and useful, Feeding the Frontier Army, and it's about the food that they would have had at Fort Snelling, and this stretches from the Revolutionary War time period to the Civil War time period, and kind of breaks it down into common meals and meals for officers and all that kind of good stuff. So a book that we've been carrying since it first came out. So for a long time we had the only copies because they ran out of, we bought the final stock of them and sold them, and then they've reprinted them like that. And then of course the British Herbs one was another one that Lauren picked out. So much fun stuff. I like books. What can I say?
It's you do tend to run out of shelf space if you like them too much, which is it's a good problem to have. Okay, so we've got a couple super chats. This one's from Speed and Style Tony. Electrical machine, the answer to my question from a past episode. And there it was.
Excellent.
I feel like, you got to have building blocks. I like to think of machines as having useful purpose, but that doesn't mean that ones that are meant for playing with aren't. Sometimes you got to have those to start with.
Well, I mean, you need the machine to play with so you can learn how to make it useful.
Yes.
Right. So
Absolutely.
you know, like that perpetual motion machine.
We'll get there one of these days.
That's right. Someday.
And this one's from Maxar. Cool. Thank you, Townsend's team. Very fun show today.
Yeah. I was surprised we were even able to come back. I was worried that we wouldn't be able to rejoin the live stream after our
But it worked. We were happy about
disaster
that.
here with all the candles blowing out.
That's what happened. Okay, I think we're all caught up.
So, excellent. What was last week's video? It was the port.
Yes, the port.
So yeah, the
I was trying to
house.
remember the name.
Yes.
Hold on. It's around here somewhere. Let's see.
Yes.
Poverty in early America. Yes.
Right. I spent a good deal of time. It's always interesting. Kind of, you know, it's a topic that I've touched on several different times, but I generally like to re-dip into all the primary research on those, and I always find something a little new and a little different, and so I was happy to come back into that topic and kind of touch base on it one more time. I know some people are like, that's the only thing they talk about on the channel. And it's like, well, you know, the thing is, it's what touches common people's lives versus, you know, those big, war happens or whatever, and like political things versus what's happening in everyday people's lives. And that's kind of what I find a little bit more interesting, whether it's common man or poor man or just regular people. Like the governor who, you know, sits around and
ready to
loans
lend a
out
shovel.
shovels. Yeah. So, always good information. Ryan's got a cooking episode coming up on Sunday. And we continue to look at what happened with the really, really interesting what's happening with the marathons on the channel. So I know the channel from our side looks completely different than how it feels from a standard YouTube user. You know, it's like, oh, what are they doing on the channel, right? And you know, we see the channel on one side, and you guys see the channel on the other side. And to us, there's a lot of excitement because of what YouTube is doing with the marathons, whereas you on the user side, it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, I haven't seen them or whatever. So check out the marathons. Yeah.
Or they've loved the marathons all along.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And so sometimes it's hard for us to contemplate. And so we're working on some ideas for possibly longer content, not necessarily kind of marathons built in place. So instead of a 10-minute cooking episode, can we make an hour-long episode that's made of, 6 different or 10 different segments? And so we're going to be always experimenting and trying out some new things here on the channel. So love to hear your comments about some of that. And you can put those in the chat or even better in the comments of the live stream later on. Those have a little easier lifetime. And we're going to be, experimenting like we always are about the ways to talk about things going on in the 18th century, what's interesting to people, and having fun with that. Super thank you to the folks who directly support us, either membership or Townsends Plus or Patreon, of course. The folks who are here in the Super Chat. Again, direct support. We can't thank you enough for that. Special thank you to all the folks who share our videos. There's so many people out there who might have fun with the kind of content we have, but they don't know about it. And so them finding out about it from you is the very best way for them to be interested in that. So thank you for what you do for that. All your encouragement in the comments and in the chat. I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for watching.